We're staying in the property sector. EMIRA Property Fund have released interim results for the 6 months to December. The group declared a dividend of 68.9 cents per share and reported an increase of 4.7% increase in vacancies. Joining us now is Jeff Jennett, who is CEO of EMIRA Property Fund. That vacancies I mentioned does catch the eye, 4.7% overall. Retail sectors up to 3.6% below the average. Office sector vacancies up to 16% above the average. Yes. So that's an interesting mixture there.
Yes, absolutely. Dave, just a small correction. The total vacancies as at 31st of December was actually up at 7%. This was what we signalled to the market back in June or in August last year. And we've certainly been anticipating that. In our office portfolio, total vacancies at the moment close to 16%. And the reason being is we've been hit by a few large single-tenant offices where the guys have vacated and vacated early. And so we're busy dealing with that. It is something we've signalled, but we certainly have made some progress on that front. So we do see this as an isolated event. We think that the base has been reset and that now we are busy rebalancing the portfolio, and we should be well positioned to bounce back to positive growth in 2018.
The office sector, though, has been under significant amount of pressure over the last few years, really. Will you be looking perhaps to realign your focus more to retail and industrial instead of office space?
Definitely, Gugu. This is the whole rebalancing process that we've begun. We identified certain office assets. We have made some progress in terms of selling those. We are looking in the retail sector, certainly in terms of our own portfolio. There's certain capex and projects that we can do. For example, on our 90,000 square metre Warner Park shopping centre, northwest of Pretoria, we're anticipating an expansion there. There are some other retail, but there's also another way in terms of that we can rebalance this portfolio, and that is an exciting one where we can actually convert offices into residential. We have 3 sites in Rosebank, in Sunnyhill, and then in Bloemfontein, where we can actually take B-grade and lower-grade office space and actually convert them into very usable lower middle LSM residential space to try and address the market in a more in those particular areas. So we're very excited about that because it gives us that diversification, as well as when you do that sort of redevelopment, your costs are lower because you've already had the building rather than sort of coming in and buying it brand new. So there's certainly an advantage, from a diversification side, but also from a yield perspective.
This be your first time moving into residential property, though?
It certainly will be, and so as much as this is a bold step for us, we are partnering with experts, 3 different experts, so that we can learn from those experts and we can absorb their skills and also lower the risk profile.
Baldwin, perhaps?
No, not Baldwin. These are
okay.
Unlisted guys that have that significant experience in that space.
Looking at student accommodation, there are a lot of companies sniffing around that. Some of them companies that have never been in property before. They're realising that there's growth to come there. But it's a peculiar market, isn't it? You know there's demand, but there's not much money.
Absolutely, and that's why you have to be careful in terms of how you do that. We are considering student accommodation on our Bloemfontein site, our Justitia House. It's close to the Bloemfontein Technikon, University of Technology, and so that's ideally suited there. But again, because it's close to the university, we can access that lessee directly.
You mentioned earlier with the early departures of some tenants that you were doing things differently, and what are those things?
So what we've had to do is we've had to adjust our rental base in terms, and that's why we are seeing rental reversions coming through. We've had to spend more money on the buildings to make them even better. We've embarked on greening initiatives and energy efficiency initiatives. So there's been a lot of stuff that we've been doing on that side. But the other thing too is on the rebalancing side, we have been moving to those smaller spaces because where we've been hurt is in those larger single-tenant office spaces, which are really attractive because there's just one check that you're collecting every month. However, if that tenant had to leave, it's difficult to fill all of that in one go. So we prefer the smaller tenants.
It's like a one commodity mining company. It's all your money's in one thing.
Indeed,
yeah.
Indeed.
What we did see as a rising theme towards the end of last year was a flock of South African companies moving into Europe, looking for potential there. Would that be something you might consider?
It's not something that we are considering at the moment, and if I look at the currency volatility, that's certainly something that I'm not sure whether everyone all considered at that point in time. But we owe it to our shareholders to look at every opportunity. And we certainly are looking to do that wherever it is, whether it's in South Africa or in the rest of the world, because the hunt for yield, the hunt for quality assets with sustainable income streams is very important.
You've put out a dividend which is at about the same level as last year's one, so almost the same.
2% less than what it was last year, exactly as what we shared with everybody 6 months ago.
But it sounds like it's been a time when you've had to be adaptable and flexible and move quickly.
It certainly has been. The last 6 months, I'm going to say, are quite in a way transformative for EMIRA, because there's a lot of things that we've needed to do and do differently. And if I look at our asset base, it's certainly got better, without doubt. And if I look at our organisation, we become stronger for this. You know, one thing to say, you're going into a difficult period. We've now been in this difficult period for 6 months, and the good news is we certainly are coming out of this stronger and better.
Something that has an influence on the period that you're in and the macroeconomic conditions is the budget speech next week. What are you hoping to hear from the Minister of Finance?
I'm hoping that he's going to keep things exactly the way they are. Maybe that's a little bit naive. I'm sure there's a need for further tax revenue. But in my mind, I'm just hoping that there's nothing that's too radical or too far stretched.
Would EMIRA be prepared for increased corporate taxes?
As a real estate investment trust, we don't incur taxes. We receive the rental income and pass it directly on, so we don't see there being an impact there. But there is an impact on the consumer, so that if the rates of tax are higher, then it's certainly going to impact the consumers, impact the companies, and so we're hoping that this will be a stable budget.
That is Jeff Jennett, CEO of EMIRA.